Welcome to the Movement for the People's Party, Tucson chapter. My name is Lee Folks. We've started a national movement that's really begun to pick up steam in this election year of 2020, a movement that will continue all year round, every year, not just at election time. With me here is Patrick Diehl, who has been at the forefront of MPP's #1 Arizona chapter to date, that is the Tucson chapter. Hello, Patrick.
Hey, Lee.
All right, how long have you lived in Tucson, Patrick?
My partner and I moved here in 2008, so it's been 12 years now. We'd also spent a winter here earlier, back 2005 or so, decided we liked the place. Went off to teach English as a second language in China, came back and settled in Tucson after 2 years in China.
Oh, wow, China sure has changed a lot in the past 10 years or so. They're challenging the United States economically, huh? And I don't think Trump likes to see them succeed too much, does he?
Well, unfortunately, the country's also become more authoritarian, and the internal situation has become more oppressive for ordinary citizens. It was already a problem back when we were there. It's a one-party state, very corrupt, and the means of controlling people have improved, unfortunately, and the regime is using them. So,
Okay.
Take on the PRC.
That would be a good topic for another day. But anyway, we're in the election season right now. So can you describe some of your history in political involvement and what attracted you to follow the Movement for the People's Party?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was involved in a few marches back in the Vietnam era, which gives you an idea of how old I am. But I didn't really become politically active until the end of the 1970s, when I got involved with the anti-nuclear weapons movement. I was on the faculty at UC Berkeley then. There was a UC Nuclear Weapons Labs Conversion Project, a very long acronym, opposing the involvement of the University of California with the weapons labs. So I got involved with that as a faculty member. Then when I didn't get tenure, I jumped right into the anti-nuclear weapons civil disobedience movement in '82, and was very involved with that for 3 years. Got arrested a lot of times. Fortunately, Reagan did not blow up the world, even though it sounded like it was going to. And we're still here, though our missiles are still on launch on warning, folks. So it could all be over in about half an hour, which I think is outrageous. So after that, I was involved in the movement against U.S. policy in Central America, which was really god-awful then and still is. And let me see. Yeah, in the mid-'90s, I was involved in a coalition against a proposed nuclear waste dump down in the Mojave Desert, east of LA, which actually succeeded in stopping the dump. And then in 1998, my partner and I moved to Utah, mainly for her health. She has multiple chemical sensitivity. So the modern world with all its chemicals is fairly hostile to her, unfortunately. So we started our own environmental group there to work on opposing grazing by sheep and cattle in the Intermountain West, which is quite devastating ecologically. We locked horns with a lot of the local environmentalists over that one, who were basically into the Wilderness Act, which does not prohibit against grazing in any way. We said, hey, it's not wilderness if it's full of cows and sheep and being destroyed by their activities. But the local environmentalists in Utah thought we were just causing problems. So that was very educational. We found out that your supposed political allies can be perhaps in some ways your worst enemies. So that was one reason we left at that point, went to France for 5 months. This was under W, after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Couldn't really survive there economically, it turned out, came back, and then took off for China for the last part of Bush's regime. We wanted to, see what a really different part of the world was like. And it was very educational for us to be in a country that was transitioning still from third world to rapidly developing, depending on where you are in China, and now to pretty developed, though there's a lot of poverty there still. It's certainly not what you'd call a rich country per capita. So that gave us a kind of different perspective on things. We traveled a lot in countries like India and in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. Okay, that was a chance for us to really get outside the West and its mindset, at least for a few months. So why I got involved with the MPP? Well, I was very involved in the Bernie campaign in 2016, again in 2020. And of course, both times it was shot down by the Democratic National Committee, its army of corporate lobbyists and corporate lawyers, and by the dependency of the Democratic Party establishment on the big money checks and the big money donors and the corporations. So after Bernie's campaign was assassinated the second time in 2020, I decided, hey, we're not going to reform the Democratic Party. I already knew in 2017 it probably wasn't going to work, but like a lot of people, I wanted to give it another try when Bernie decided to run again. So I moved to MPP. As far as the issues are concerned, the Movement for a People's Party is largely a continuation of Bernie's campaign, you could say. Its current platform is Bernie's platform slightly tweaked. So a lot of us in the Movement for a People's Party are Berners, though certainly not all of us. A lot of young people are coming in who didn't even have a chance to be in the Bernie campaigns. So I always supported Bernie because of the issues, not as a personality cult. When Bernie decided to endorse Joe Biden, I said, enough of this.
Exactly.
I'm going to go to the Movement for a People's Party. I've been reading Nick Brannan's emails for years, finding the arguments in them very persuasive, and now how he had the solid evidence that he had been right. So the party is trying to get a majoritarian party going that actually reflects the wishes of the Democratic Party base, which is overwhelmingly in favor of things like Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, canceling student debt, making higher education tuition free, at least in public universities, and so on and so forth. It's the voters want all of these things, but the Democratic Party establishment refuses to recognize their desires. So the party is basically abandoning its own base and has been doing that for decades, frankly.
Well, the Democrat Party started out in the 1790s as basically a slave master's party. In 1948, Henry Wallace was like the Bernie of his day, and they stole the nomination from him and gave it to Harry Truman, who was just a yes man. In 1968, RFK could have been the best president of my life and yours too, I guess, and they put a bullet through his head. So the Democratic Party has a history destroying progressives in their own party and keeping it a conservative party, which it really has been pretty much forever.
Thomas Piketty, the remarkable French political scientist, has put out a new book, Capital and Ideology, which I recommend. I warn people that it's 1,000 pages long, but he presents overwhelming evidence for how, not just in the US, but also in European countries and elsewhere, parties that 50 years ago reflected the lower half of the socioeconomic ladder, like ordinary working stiffs, okay, have now moved to become the party of the winners, the more educated, and have left the people who make less money and have less status in the society. And as a result, we get those people who have been abandoned by their former party voting for Trump, which they did again in sufficient numbers almost to visit that horror on us for another 4 years. I mean, it is like incredibly close. After 4 years of disaster, people still voted for Trump rather than vote for the status quo party, the Democratic Party, and their incredibly pathetically weak candidate, Joe Biden. So I think his analysis is that the Democratic Party and its counterparts in other countries are not at all what they were 50 years ago when I was young. They have moved drastically toward the right which is now called the center in the media. And therefore, people feel that no one cares about them, so they vote for, people like Trump. And it's not just here. It's also happening in European countries.
Yeah, I saw Thomas Piketty like a 2-hour interview one time. He's really good. I would definitely recommend him.
Yeah.
And I think the Democrats would rather lose with Hillary or Joe Biden than win with Bernie. That's how they're really in the same club. The Democrats, Republicans, they're in the same club. Hillary and Donald Trump are really good friends since the 90s, and they're still good friends today. Nancy Pelosi wants to coup Venezuela just like Trump does. So what's the difference really, between the two?
Well, they're both taking big checks from corporate donors. I mean, the Republicans are openly, cozy with the big money. The Democrats disguise it a little bit. But like you take Medicare for all, I forget what the percentage of support is among Democratic voters and independents. I think it's more than 3 to 1,
Right. Oh, yeah.
And yet the Democratic Party won't even put Medicare for all in its non-binding platform. That's what happened in August. That obviously would upset the healthcare industry if the Democratic Party would put it in their platform.
Right.
Not that that's worth much, but they won't even do that. They're not going to endanger the flow of money through their umbilical cord, connecting them to the healthcare industry. And you can go on to other, big categories of corporations in this country. You'll see the same thing.
Yeah, they've been bought up by Big Pharma, just like the Republicans have been, really.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Bloomberg slides over from Republican to Democrat. He could slide over back and forth. It's all the same to him, right? It's the same club.
Yeah.
So, okay. So anyway, since there's election week and they're still counting votes right now, let's talk a little bit about the election. I got a graphic I'm going to put up here. Let me find it here. Here it is. Okay. Hopefully you can see this in a minute. And see, can you see that graphic of the voter turnout?
Yep.
Okay, I'll make this a little bigger. So, and I got these numbers from CNBC. Now, They're still counting votes now, so these numbers will change daily. Anyway, we have about 239 million eligible voters. At this point, there's about 24 hours old now, maybe a little more. And Biden had 28.7% of the vote. Trump had 27.6% of the vote. Third parties had almost 1%. And eligible voters who chose not to vote had 42.8%. Now, since they're still counting more votes, this number could come down to like 41%, 40%. But still, it's far more than either candidate got. So it seems like none of the above wins every election. And so what does Movement for the People's Party want to do about that?
Well, to go back to Piketty, he points out that the situation of most people voting with their feet by not voting at all is a very dangerous situation. It's going to lead to nativist, xenophobic populism, the way it has in Hungary, for instance. For those who are following in the rest of the world, not just our little piece of it. Obviously, Trump is another example. So the Movement for a People's Party is hoping to bring in people who are alienated from voting, from participation in the political process, back into the fold, so to speak, by actually supporting the issues that people support. So that's the strategy. If you actually work for things that people want and stop taking money from the corporations and serving their interests, then there's a chance, at least, that we can get people voting again and voting for the things that they want and therefore supporting Movement for a People's Party candidates. So that's the idea. The dark side of this is if we don't bring these people back into political action, then we are probably just going to have an even worse Trump next time around, because the basic underlying situation that led to 4 years of Trump has not changed at all. The Democratic Party is doing nothing to change it. It's doing everything it can to alienate people even more, including lots of Democratic voters. And it's time for a divorce and for progressive people to get out of the party and start talking directly to the majority of the people and create a majoritarian party and let the obsolete parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, wither on the vine or change their spots or whatever metaphor you like. The current situation is untenable, and it threatens us with even worse times ahead if we don't rise up and change it.
Well, as long as people keep voting for people like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, even Obama, they're going to keep feeding the monster, and it's never going to go away if we keep feeding it.
Well, the problem, actually, there will be an even worse monster down the road, is Piketty's argument. Yeah, so the status quo, do nothing at all about global warming, nothing significant, will just continue until basically the existing status quo blows up because people really aren't going to take it anymore. And there we have a fork in the road. You know, we're hoping to disrupt the status quo now in a positive way rather than wait for it to be disrupted in an extremely negative way. I think the threat is very obvious to those who are willing to see and who stop clinging to their fear, basically, that they're afraid to challenge the corporate domination because that will bring us Trump. But in fact, if you don't challenge it, you're going to get Trump on steroids. Such is my view.
Yeah, can you see this pie chart I have up there?
Yeah.
All right, so who really had the most votes? Now, theoretically, if Movement for People's Party can take over this big slice of the pie, the yellow, the people who are disinterested, these are the people who care about the issues you mentioned, like Medicare for all, spending money on education, healthcare, housing, instead of endless wars. These are the people who could come back to the polls and theoretically blow away these other two parties.
Right.
And this is a great idea. We just want to see it materialize. And a lot of us all around the country are doing our best to make something happen. That's a great history you have, your lifelong commitment to the progressive cause. It's a great story you told. And anyway.
Yeah, I'm working on it, but things have been getting worse, I think we've all noticed, right? We've been trapped into lesser evilism, which has left more and more people cold, disenchanted, inactive, you know? So we're in a downward spiral since the 60s, frankly, with the Democratic Party moving to the right, neoliberalism dominating more and more. The notion that there could be an alternative to this basically terminal disease we have politically. People have, largely, it seems like, lost the notion that there might be another way or another world even. So it's high time that we start seriously organizing. And I think maybe we're at, as I was saying, a break point where people might be open to saying, hey, the way we've been doing things is not working. We got to try something fundamentally different.
When you think about the George Floyd protests back in like May and June, so what does the Democratic Party do? They they put in the top cop in California who put more black people in jail in California than anybody in history. And then they also put Biden in there, who wrote the crime bill in '94, which made us the country in the world with the highest incarceration rate in the entire world. So they take the right side, the right wing side of that issue, and the people have really nobody to go to.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they're very explicit about their strategy. They're trying to appeal to moderate Republicans, essentially. And their assumption is that progressives will have to vote for them because the alternative is too horrible to contemplate. And that's produced this kind of political scene that this pie chart describes. The lack of enthusiasm for Biden was extremely clear from the returns. For instance, in Florida, voters went for raising the minimum wage. More voters went for that than for Biden, okay? So a progressive measure got support in Florida, but Biden lost heavily. Okay, that kind of shows you where things are. You know, they really scraped the bottom of the barrel to come up with him as a candidate. It was anyone but Bernie, anyone but a real threat to the corporate interests from which the Democratic Party derives its funding.
Yeah, well, I think they see how elitist Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden are, and just they figured back in 2016 that Trump was a wild card who might do something. Now we know he's just a corporatist, just like anybody else. So I guess Florida was similar in that you look at this pie chart, Florida probably had a huge number of people who didn't vote. So
Sure.
Anyway, get back to Arizona. Arizona's been a Republican-dominated state for the past 3 decades. Why do you think that has changed this year with Democrats, Biden and Mark Kelly appearing to win in Arizona pending final vote count, and local Democrats virtually sweeping in Tucson and Pima counties?
Right. Yeah, this is quite striking considering what didn't happen in a lot of other states where the Democrats vote for gains. In fact, in some cases, have actually suffered losses, no doubt due to the miserable quality of their, presidential ticket. But anyway, yeah, I've seen various things suggested. I mean, there are definitely demographic shifts happening in Arizona. People have moved in from California who can't afford to live there. I think bringing more progressive views with them. The Latino segment of the population is increasing, which generally, I think, favors Democratic candidates. I think there's also just the fact that the old are dying off and the young are coming along, and polls show that the young have more progressive views. The one thing, they're very concerned about climate change, because 2050 doesn't sound very far away from them. Apparently, for people in their 60s and 70s, it doesn't really matter, what happens in 2050, given the way a lot of my contemporaries are voting, unfortunately. So, I think it's a combination of factors here in Arizona. I notice marijuana legalization passed easily. It looks like Proposition 208, which is basically a soak the rich proposition and support education better. It's been really kicked around by the Republicans since the Great Recession. So it's about time some more money got put into it. I was disappointed not to see heavier support for Proposition 208, but there's still the anti-tax mentality out there. Any kind of tax is bad, even if it's only on people making over $250,000 a year. Not people like you and me, I'll tell you. But there are a lot of camp followers out there who will vote against a tax, even if it's only on a very tiny percentage of the population who've lucked out and ended up with a lot of money. So I don't think I have any original or profound analysis of Arizona. But again, I'll note that the 2 propositions, both of which could be considered progressive, the marijuana legalization proposition and the one for funding schools, somewhat better. Okay, they passed by quite a bit, I think. At least marijuana did. One did. And Biden apparently is going to pull it out of the fire here, but not by much. Yeah, Pima County has long been the Democratic stronghold in the state. And I'm not exactly sure why there was such a Democratic sweep or close to it this time. It may be just kind of the culmination of a long historical process of movement in the progressive direction. But I think I would want to await better informed analysis, okay? And I welcome the fact that we have, 4 out of 5 county supervisors, or at least they're Dems. And I think they're reasonably progressive, at least some of them.
Well, once they get to the higher levels, at the federal levels, they tend to get corrupted by money. So I think most of the local Democrats are not so bad, not so corrupt.
That's probably true. And I should particularly mention the election of an indigenous Tohono O'odham woman to county recorder, Gabriela Caceres Kelly. That's that's quite an event. And I also am glad that Laura Conover won the primary and then won the election for county DA. I think that may mean a considerable change. I think she's less likely to have that bad old prosecutor mentality of putting as many notches in the butt of your gun as possible by sending as many people up as possible for as long as possible, which seems to have been how prosecutors think they're going to get reelected. I'm hoping that Laura will not be into that approach to law enforcement.
Yeah, we've got to start freeing people and spending. We should, invest money on educating these people. We spend 6 times more to incarcerate them than we would to educate them. And we make it a much better country if we would educate them instead of putting them in jail and destroying their lives, not to mention their families' lives.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think, again, there's majority support for ending mass incarceration in the country. But, of course, the Republicans aren't doing it. And the Democrats are into, half measures and delay and basically second guessing themselves, looking over their shoulder, don't want to take any chances, even though most of the population thinks it's ridiculous for this country to be up there with North Korea or even worse. I forget what the statistics are.
Right. Well, yeah, I know our incarceration rate is the highest in the entire world, higher than China, higher than Russia, higher than North Korea, you name it. We're number one in the world. They say we're the land of the free. Well, according to that statistic, it's the opposite. We're the land of the incarcerated.
It's shameful.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you see as the prospects for the movement for the People's Party for next year's elections in November of 2021 and beyond?
Well, I think we're still going to be in the building phase for another year. I would look to 2022 as probably the earliest date where Movement for a People's Party will have its act together sufficiently, will have the resources to run candidates and start winning races. So maybe, 2021 is definitely an off year. I'm not sure just what races will be coming up. There'll probably be some here and there, but I think the focus is really going to be on 2022. The founding convention, where the party will form officially and will also vote on its platform. We have a provisional platform now, as I said, coming out of Bernie's platform, but next year is when the actual party platform will be established. And, that's not going to happen until the summer or the fall, sounds like. So getting it all together to, running a lot of races in November seems improbable to me just a year from now. So that's my own take. Yeah, I just want to mention, I don't think we said that, this party is not going to take big money. It's not going to take money from corporations at all. It's going to depend on small donations. Bernie showed us the way there. Even the Republicans are catching on now. You actually can raise money from ordinary people in small amounts. And I think this is a really good thing, not just because the funding of the party is less likely to lead to corrupt behavior, but also because I think it draws more people into the political process. And, I agree with Piketty and others that we desperately need to involve more people in deciding the policies of our countries. At this point, people vote and then their votes get ignored by the elites who are funded by or who are actually composed of the corporations and, the wealthy in general, some of whom inherited their wealth, though they generally enjoy it thanks to investments in corporations. So that's how the web works. Anyway, so the Movement for a People's Party is very conscious, as was Bernie, about not taking money with strings attached, with going to the people for the people's support financially for the party.
Right. Okay, well, I think that about wraps it up. I really appreciate your lifetime efforts, and I hope we can keep this momentum going from this year right into next year and every year thereafter.
Right.
Thanks a lot for being with us, Patrick.
Sure, thanks for doing the interview, Lee.
Sure.
Okay.
See you next time. Okay, bye.